Prisoner of War, The Death Ring. Subscribe for more real prison stories. Like, share, and join the discussion below. The crowd roared like thunder. Michael stood in a muddy ring with a stranger in front of him. Lights burned over the circle, and shadows moved on the wet ground. Guards watched. Men in uniform shouted. Michael's heart hit his ribs hard. It felt like it would break. He could see his friends tied to posts near the edge, their faces pale and wet from rain. A scarred man lifted a whistle and blew. The stranger lunged. Michael ran, grabbed and pushed. A loud crack split the air. Someone screamed. Michael froze. What happens next? The whistle blows again, and everything goes silent but for the drips of water and breathing. No one knows if Michael will stand again. Weeks before that night, Michael was a soldier in a unit that trained. He was 29 from Ohio. His captain, Daniel Reed, trusted him. They went on patrol near the coast looking for danger. They laughed over coffee and letters from home. Michael kept a photo of his little brother in his pocket. He thought the war was far, and he wanted to go back home. The patrol met a road that suddenly broke into smoke. Bullets came from trees. Men fell. Michael heard shouts and a voice call his name. He ran toward the sound and found Daniel collapsed. Michael pulled him to cover, but then a truck cut their escape. They were surrounded. They fought as hard as they could, but there were too many. Men in dark uniforms closed in. Michael felt a heavy blow to his head and then a flash of bright pain. When he woke, he was tied and led to a camp by the sea. The sky was low and gray. The camp had tall fences and angry dogs. The prisoners were few and quiet. Michael slept on the hard ground and shared food with a man named Tom, who had lost his boot. They traded jokes to keep warm, though inside they felt cold. Michael thought of his brother and promised he would try to survive. Days passed and hope thinned. The guards began to bring outsiders to the camp to watch cruel games. At first it was whispers. Then one night the guards forced a door and dragged a man into the mud. The camp fell silent. Michael looked up. He knew he would not be safe for long. The next morning the guards came for him, tied a rope to his wrists, and dragged him to a ring where a crowd waited. Rain poured hard as Michael stood in the ring, his wrists bleeding from the rope. The ground was soft and cold under his bare feet. Around him, prisoners and guards formed a circle, shouting in languages he didn't understand. One guard stepped forward, holding a wooden staff, tapping it against the ground. "Fight!" he barked. The crowd roared again. Michael faced a man much bigger than him, a soldier from another captured unit. The man's eyes were full of fear, not anger. Michael could see the same thing in his own reflection. A man who didn't want to fight but had no choice. A gun cocked somewhere behind him, a warning. The man rushed forward. They clashed, mud splashed, fists hit flesh. The sound was dull and painful. Every punch felt like hitting stone. Michael stumbled, tasted blood, and for a moment saw stars. But something inside him refused to fall. He thought of his brother's photo still hidden in his pocket, of the promise he'd made to stay alive. He swung back not for the fight, but for survival. The crowd went wild when the bigger man dropped to his knees. The guard stepped closer, pointing his gun at Michael's chest. Michael froze, breathing hard, waiting for the shot. But it didn't come. Instead, the guard smirked and nodded. The crowd cheered louder. They liked the show. The prisoners were dragged back to their cells. Michael's hands shook as he sat on the cold floor beside Tom, his friend. Tom Lowes, okay, pale and weak. "They're turning us into monsters," he whispered. Michael didn't answer. He stared at the dirt and whispered a silent prayer. That night, thunder rolled above the camp. The guards drank near the watchtower, laughing and yelling. Michael looked at the fence through the cracks in the wooden wall. Beyond it, the forest was dark but free. He felt a spark of hope, something he hadn't felt in weeks. He leaned close to Tom. "If we can make it to the forest," he whispered, "we can make it home." Tom looked at him, fear in his eyes. "They'll kill us if we try." "They'll kill us if we stay," Michael said softly. They both stared out at the lightning flashing across the sky. Michael's heart beat fast. He didn't know how or when, but he was going to escape. The next morning, the whistle blew again. The guards called his name. This time, it wasn't for another fight. It was for something far worse. The guards pushed Michael and Tom out into the gray morning. The camp smelled of smoke and rain. A truck waited near the gates, its engine growling like a beast. Michael's wrists were tied again, his clothes soaked from the storm. A tall officer with a scar across his cheek stepped forward and pointed at them. "New orders," he said in a cold voice. "You're being moved." Moved. The word chilled Michael more than the rain. Prisoners whispered that being moved meant only one thing: the end of the line. The guards herded them into the truck. Inside, it was dark and hot, the air thick with sweat. Michael sat beside Tom, who was coughing hard. "Hold on," Michael whispered, gripping his friend's shoulder. "Just a little longer." Hours passed as the truck rattled down muddy roads. Through the cracks, Michael could see jungle trees whipping by. He counted turns, watched shadows, and memorized every sound. Somewhere deep inside, a plan was forming. When the truck hit a sharp bend, the back door jolted slightly open, just enough for a sliver of light to slip in. Michael's pulse raced. He nudged Tom. "When it's slow, Sier's down," he said. "We jump." Tom's eyes widened. "We'll die out there." Michael looked back at the armed guards in front. "We'll die here if we don't." Moments later, the truck slowed to cross a shallow stream. Michael's heart thundered. "Now!" he shouted. They lunged for the gap, tumbling into the muddy water below. Gunfire erupted behind them. Bullets hissed through the trees. Michael dragged Tom by the arm, running blindly through thick brush. Branches tore at their skin. Mud splashed their faces, but they didn't stop. After what felt like hours, they collapsed near a fallen tree. Tom was bleeding from his leg. "Go," he whispered, gasping. "They'll catch us both." Michael shook his head, tears mixing with rain. "Not leaving you." He tore his shirt and wrapped it around Tom's wound. The jungle was silent except for their breathing and distant shouts. By nightfall, the shouts faded. They had lost the soldiers, but the jungle was endless. Michael stared up at the stars through the misty canopy. He thought of Ohio, of his brother, of freedom. He helped Tom stand, and together they limped toward a faint glow in the distance. Maybe a village, maybe another trap. Then came the sound. Engines, dogs barking, voices shouting again. Michael tightened his grip on Tom's arm. His heart pounded in his chest. There was nowhere left to run. And as flashlights cut through the darkness, Michael whispered, "Whatever happens, we don't stop fighting." The jungle swallowed their shadows as the soldiers closed in, and the night held its breath. Think this was dark? The next story goes deeper. Subscribe and uncover what's next.